You're listening to the Journey Podcast. Is there a bridge to recovery built on the foundation of reconnecting with our physical selves? Find out more in today's episode. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Journey Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. In this episode, we delve into the healing power of movement as a means to reconnect with our bodies, especially after experiencing trauma. We discuss a gentle, mindful approach to movement that can help bridge the gap between physical and emotional healing. By embracing activities that allow us to tune into our body's signals and needs, we learn to move in ways that honor our experiences and promote healing. As the founder of My Body Couture, a one-on-one private movement studio, Janis Isaman is a trauma-sensitive movement specialist focused on providing customized, personalized body-focused services to clients with chronic pain, illness, injuries, and other movement limitations. She is a leader in approaching mental health and wellness from a body-first lens. Her trauma credentials include the compassionate inquiry psychotherapy approach developed by Gabor Mate, Trauma Center Trauma-Sensitive Yoga, Somatic Experiencing International developed by Peter Levine, and Trauma Research Foundation's Traumatic Stress Certificate program with Bessel van der Kolk. Janis is known for her whole body approach to movement, focused on addressing the root cause of limitations and aesthetic concerns. Her practical, functional, and discipline-agnostic approach blends physical and evidence-based mental health modalities into a relatable, innovative, and effective body sustainability program. This approach offers clients education and usable tools and has changed how thousands have related to the experience of their own bodies. In her personal life, she is a mother and passionate community volunteer with the Calgary Stampede, 17th Avenue Business District, Heritage Park, and Kids Up Front. She holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Alberta. Here's my interview with Janis Isaman. Hi, Janis. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because movement for mental health is such a fascinating topic for today's conversation. I actually really look forward to it. So thank you for coming to join us today and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm really, really excited to chat with you.
Yeah, it's a topic that we do hear about sometimes, but I think not often enough. So I'm very curious to find out more. For starters, would you like to share a little bit about yourself and your story and actually what you do today?
Yeah, so I'm a trauma-sensitive movement specialist. So that's a set of words that most people aren't super familiar with. We do have a little bit of a surge in popularity about the word trauma. People kind of can figure out what movement specialist means. But really, when you dissect it, I have a certification from the Trauma Center called Trauma-Sensitive Yoga. And it is a clinically proven, evidence-based strategy for working with trauma. That's something very specific. The movement specialist component of my title, is because I actually work with other modalities as well. I am integrating and incorporating these evidence-based strategies into other movement capacities as well. Things like Pilates, critical alignment therapy, Yamuna body rolling. I'm really using exercise as a tool for helping people with their physical as well as mental health.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. And how did you end up doing this kind of work? I'm always curious about my guests' stories and what brought them to where they are today. So what brought you here and why do you do what you do?
I do what I do because this evolution in my own body has been somewhat difficult. And it's really, I do what I do because it's taken 30 years to get here. I didn't stumble upon this as the solution and the thing that I wanted to do. So going way back to my childhood and my upbringing, I always really struggled with my body. There are lots of children who just sports and athletics and everything to do with their body just comes easily. I am not that person at all. I'm not in any way what somebody would call athletics. So if we look at kind of those natural skill sets that pop up when you're a kid, athleticism was not on my list. It was decidedly off my list. Unfortunately, we as kids usually have to go through formalized physical education programs in school. Being somebody who was really not gifted at this and was bad at it, it created even more problems because most of those programs really centered around team sports and balls. And like to this day, I'm bad at team sports. I'm bad at anything with a ball. But what was kind of missing from that was using physical education as a tool for my life, or finding something where I could feel that sense of agency, have that choice, feel that sense of joy about moving. So the only place that I ever really felt out as a kid was on my bicycle. That was about it. Everything else, it was kind of like this competitive, terrible thing for me. So I kind of grew up thinking like, I'm just bad at this and it's hopeless. And then I went to university. And like many people, I kind of was a little bit interested. I will be very honest. The aesthetic component of my body sort of drove me to try to find something. And I ended up running and I hurt my knee. And at that point, it almost doubled down on the struggles. Like other people can run, other people can have this easy experience with their body, and I'm struggling with it. I would put that as kind of a bit of a marker for the start of my own story. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, where something about the experience of our body through our life has been a bit troublesome, or it feels like other people have an easier time. And I feel like my body just doesn't understand a lot of instructions right away. It takes a little bit of extra time to figure things out. That began the start of a 20-year exploration of my own body. And within that, I found what we would call today, it's called Pilates, but at that time, it went by a different name. I stumbled into a Pilates studio along my discovery pathway after going to different doctors and therapists and all these different people to try to help. And Pilates was really the first modality where I ever felt like I belonged, that I could master it, that I had that sense of agency, where there was something interesting there for me to explore, and that I could actually feel like I could control my body. And I say that in the sense where I could say, oh, leg, move this way, and it actually would do that. And I wasn't actually failing at it. That became the first modality that I actually trained in. And back in those days, we didn't talk about trauma or the impact of the body. Kind of fast forwarding that story, I ended up quitting my corporate job and opening a studio and working with people. Not only did I continue to have different struggles with my body by that time and had a child, and I was just repeating the same story that I just told you with a different problem, going to different practitioners, like nobody could quite figure it out. Everything looked correct from the outside, but it felt bad on the inside. I was working with clients with a mixed set of modalities. And I noticed that what would happen, because I work one-to-one with people, is we would get to a certain place in the work and a lot of people would start revealing really intimate personal things about themselves, really challenging circumstances from their past, from their childhood. And I could today language that as trauma. At the time, I had no idea why this kept happening or what I should say. I already had a number of different certifications. So I immediately set out to find a mental health certification that would kind of answer this. And it kept circling back to, well, it's the mind-body modalities of yoga and Pilates. Like, it's not, though, because I'm already certified in those. I ended up finding some really specific trauma trainings, which really ended up answering why I struggled with my body, as well as why my clients were having these giant revelations. Subsequently added, I've done over 1,000 hours of trauma training. And what that really means is it's how your body has integrated or understands the experiences that overwhelmed you. And quite often people with trauma don't like their body, or we're not connected to our body. Even a simple thing like catch a ball, I'm not sure where my arm is. I'm not sure how fast that ball is coming at me. even with all the trauma work I've done, I'm not ever going to be a baseball player. But having more connection to my own body has made a huge difference to me in terms of I no longer feel like my body's a flaw. And I'm in a position now where integrating this work with clients, I'm seeing what a difference it makes to other people as well. It's been a really organic kind of pathway through this world that started with really physical work and has landed me in this amazing place where I'm able to help both myself and clients with the mental health aspects and our feelings and sensations around our body and our perceptions of our own body, etc.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that story with us. And there are so many points that you touched on where I'm nodding along and just thinking back. And I almost feel like PE or physical education classes can be traumatizing in themselves for many, many young people, for students. And it is part of what later becomes off-putting about adding movement or exercise to your daily routine because it was such a trauma when we were younger that later on it doesn't even enter our minds as something that could help heal trauma or challenges that we're experiencing. So thank you for being vulnerable and brave to share that, because I think that actually speaks to many, many listeners that may have had those same experiences. And I'm glad that you have now found something that goes to the movement, goes to the exercise, that actually can be part of the healing process. That is amazing. Now, you are a trauma sensitive movement specialist, and I was curious what the difference between trauma sensitive and trauma informed is, because we kind of use those interchangeably very often. Are they actually different things when we talk about that?
That is a really good question. They are actually different things. So trauma informed at this time in history, at the moment we're recording this, means nothing. It's an unregulated term. I can be trauma informed if I watch a video. I can be trauma informed if I take a weekend course. I was able to be called trauma informed after a 20-hour weekend course. And within that, there is no regulation around what material needs to be taught. So I have met other practitioners who, in the world of yoga, some people use cards, some people avoid certain postures, some people are avoiding certain words, things like that. When I say it means nothing, I'm not undermining that somebody perhaps hasn't done some education, but it means nothing in the sense that we're not globally regulating that term. So you can have a trauma-informed person who actually has taken quite a lot of coursework, or you can have somebody who hasn't taken any coursework and everything in between. Trauma sensitive, however, in the world of movement is a trademark term. So the only people who can use that particular term and phrase are people who've been trained by the Trauma Center Trauma Sensitive Yoga program. That is a specific protocol, and it's evidence-based and clinically proven. And that actually matters because what that means is there are actual studies on the efficacy of that. Within that program, there are a certain number of hours, but there's also certain key pieces that are included in the work. So things like giving the client choice, giving the client a sense of agency, dosing and titration. So a lot of those words won't necessarily mean anything pulled out of context, but what we're doing in that work is we are able to clinically impact trauma and help integrate those experiences in the body through some very specific techniques that have been shown by way of evidence to actually be effective. There is an understanding, or the beginning of a kernel of understanding, of how we can help people use movement to overcome traumatic experience in the body. There was recently a study that was published in JAMA, and it showed there was a study done, I believe it was 2017 to 2022, I believe, on trauma-sensitive yoga versus cognitive behavioral therapy in United States women's veterans with PTSD. And it showed to be as effective as the cognitive behavioral therapy, and the participants actually had higher rates of completing the program. And it was a 10-week program. That's where we actually, that term really means something very specific. And you'll find the same thing in the mental health world where there's trademark terms. If you actually have CPTSD or PTSD and you're looking for a trauma modality, the same way that you would if you're going to go do TRE or EMDR, if you're familiar with those terms, the trauma centers, trauma sensitive yoga would be a modality that you would look for. If you're somebody who is interested in, more broadly speaking, working with trauma and emotion in the body, a trauma-informed practitioner may or may not be the kind of person that you're looking for, because again, that kind of ranges the gamut. Certainly a trauma-sensitive practitioner can modulate a program that's a little bit less clinically focused. And that's what I'm actually doing with most of my clients. So we're taking and integrating those pieces, maybe not applying the whole piece to it.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that, because I also did not know that. And I think those are important distinctions for, especially if people are looking for help with their specific challenges, that they can choose a practitioner that will suit them and their journey in that sense. So yeah, thank you for that. Now, before we talk a little bit about the actual modality, let's talk about why movement and mental health go together and how they actually work together and how movement impacts mental health and how it can help. Because when we chatted before, you mentioned for a long time we kind of had this split between physical symptoms, emotional, mental problems, and those two actually weren't connected in any kind of way. We try to address them separately. So we now know that there needs to be a mind-body component to our healing. How do those things, movement and mental health, fit together?
That's a huge, huge question. It's a good one because, as we talked earlier, for many years, centuries, in fact, the mind and the body were separated. We had the fields of psychology and psychiatry that exclusively dealt with problems of the mind and the brain. And then we had medicine that dealt with problems of the body. And I think that the only crossover really that was happening in any significant way was that people who had things like depression and anxiety would often also end up at the doctor to get medication. In the 80s and 90s, we would call yoga and Pilates, quote unquote, mind body movement. And what I actually find really interesting today is that it's really possible to do yoga and not actually have any connection to your mind. You can just do the postures without having any sense of really awareness. Last year, I actually joined a Pilates studio, and I would say a lot of the cueing was the same way. When you're in a space where the focus is the music and counting down reps and hearing things like, just push through, you got this. We don't really have a lot of mind involved in that. I think that even those kind of quote unquote mind body disciplines can really edge into just being body disciplines very quickly. What I've seen though is on the flip side of it is in the years that I've been involved in my fitness certifications, again, we kind of used to, fitness instructors only learned bones, muscles, joints, movements, and therapists only learned mental health techniques. And in all of the trauma courses that I've been in, we have those two bodies of people together in the same room, where the therapists are learning how to discern tiny little movements of people's bodies and facial expressions and listen to modulations in the voice and cue people into feeling into their bodies and sharing verbally where they're feeling sensation. And then people from the body work and fitness modalities are learning those therapeutic techniques of what are the mechanisms that are actually effective for having people move forward on some component of mental health. There are endless studies that have been published that show connection between depression, anxiety, even things like creativity. I did reference the study earlier about PTSD. So there's a lot of body of material that shows exercise is positive for your mental health. I'm not personally comfortable with something outside of that body where I'm not going to promise somebody never has to go to the doctor. It's like this wellness solution to end everything where you never need any other interventions. But there's certainly a lot of evidence that just shows that no matter what sort of mental health struggles that you are having, exercise is going to be, at the very least, an adjunctive component. And what adjunctive means is that you're using it in addition to something else. So you may still need to go to the doctor. You may still need medication, but exercise is going to be helpful pretty much across the board. Every study that I've ever looked at related to exercise, it's not even on the fence. It is objectively helpful. And I think what gets really interesting is what pieces of it are helpful. That's where we start to wander pretty far off the path from like the traditional fitness world where we're with the loud music and the tight outfits. None of that is actually the mechanism of efficacy. None of that is even the motivation factor. The mechanisms of efficacy are where we really want to look at that. And they're things like having choice, having agency, having a sense of empowerment. For a lot of people, that's not going to require going to any kind of class. You can go for a walk. You can modulate your own yoga practice in the morning if yoga is your thing. So there's a lot of ways that we can do this on our own that have nothing to do with going to a gym or joining a sports team or anything that we learned or didn't learn in phys ed class.
Yeah. And as you're kind of going through those different options, I am thinking back of when I was struggling with my mental health, and exercise was the last thing on my mind. I was happy some days just to get out of bed. And so expecting that we do big workouts or an hour-long yoga session, and those times is just not possible. And many people also struggle with chronic pain when they're struggling with mental health challenges. So it's not physically possible in many instances to, oh, let's jump in a workout just because it's good for you. It doesn't work that way. Yeah. So I like the idea of choice and agency and building something that that individual can do in that moment where they're at and where they're finding themselves, be that with pain, be that with mental health struggles, but find a way and a place for them to do this in. So let's go back to the trauma-centered, trauma-sensitive yoga then. And what does that look like when you're working with clients? How's that different from, let's say, regular yoga that people would see with, crazy poses and we're sweating and we're losing weight and all those things? How does that differ? And how is this more supportive of individuals who are struggling with maybe mental health challenges or pain?
It often doesn't even look like what we would have in our mind about yoga. And I think that that's a really important thing to kind of highlight, underline, star, asterisk, all the things, because when we use the word yoga, we tend to have something really specific in our mind. So you've got the outfit, you've got the mat, you've got a whole series of pretzel-y postures. And in trauma-sensitive yoga, to be honest, I don't even call it yoga because it's actually a set of movement. So what it will look like, I'll just give you an example. If interested, you may choose to raise your arm. You can explore the sensation. And if interested, you can do another one. That might be where you start. When we think about exercise, that might feel like that's not exercise, but it's moving the body. There's a choice piece there. And every single movement is going to have two choices. I gave the example of raising your arm. If interested, you may choose to bring your arm forward. You can explore the sensation up and down, and you may choose to explore the sensation moving the arm forward. So right there, we've got somebody moving the arm. They have two choices, and they can choose to not move their arm at all. And then there's going to be cueing about, and this is where I used the word dosing earlier. For somebody with a lot of trauma, they may have no sensation in their arm. I would dose this very small. So in a given class, maybe 1 or 2 cues, but can you notice sensation in the arm? Can you feel that your arm is connected to your body? What sensations do you notice in your arm? And so again, that might be for somebody who has more severe trauma. But in every single one of my sessions, I'm cueing people to notice body parts and to notice what sensations they are experiencing and where they are experiencing those sensations. So there's no client in any of my sessions where we're not doing a lot of that cueing. I would say that that doesn't meet most people's expectations of what yoga would be. Now, of course, that technique, we can get into something that is more rigorous, But that's for most people where we would start. And if you talk about you're bedridden with depression, it is going to be difficult. It is going to be very challenging to get up out of bed and to sit. But one moment of that can start to affect that change process. So I referenced this earlier, but if we really look at a clinical program being 10 weeks, it's one day at a time. And in 10 weeks, you might go from, I choose to move my arm. I make a decision on whether I want my arm to move up or forward. And can I even feel my arm? You might choose to extend the time. You might choose to find a favorite that you really connect with, that you like doing. You might choose to do something more challenging. You might choose to stay there. And so I think that's part of what's baked into this methodology, which is we're not striving. We're not looking for something like in 10 weeks, I'm going to be doing this for 60 minutes. Maybe, maybe not. And it's all really about the choice and really feeling your body and then making each choice relative to how your body feels. So anybody with any experience of mental health knows that every day is not the same. Every morning isn't even the same as every afternoon. Allowing you to modulate that for yourself and not have a whole narrative of something's wrong with me, I can't do it. Or even the cultural concept of all workouts have to be 60 minutes. You must sweat. You must do it in a certain place. Each one of us listening to this probably has 6 or 7 things that we think of as fitness, and it either checks the box or doesn't. Part of this technique is really integrating movement and choice and sensation in the body at each given present moment. And that is really part of how we're integrating that mental health component, because we're being in our body right now, not yesterday, not tomorrow, not what we think that we should be doing, but right now.
Yeah. Wow. That sounds amazing, I have to say. And I'm curious, what kind of changes do you notice as you're working with yourself or your clients, if they're coming to you with PTSD or complex PTSD or any other challenges? What do you notice? What are some of the common things that start happening and changing for your clients as they're finding that connection with their body again?
I would say, first, I'll share a story about myself. I was really surprised because when I took the trauma sensitive yoga training, it was not my first trauma training. So I had already done hundreds of hours of trauma work on myself. And I was shocked to find myself while doing the yoga or the movement, I cried more than once because it really was the first time that I ever actually had choice, where I didn't feel like I was having to perform for a teacher or pretend that I wasn't desperately uncomfortable or do a set of movements because I wasn't quite at the full hour or try to do something because I was trying to lose weight. Even as far as I had come, I was like, whoa, I didn't know what actually choice felt like in my body. With clients, I would say, and again, that's probably not a realistic expectation in 10 weeks, but what brings me the most joy, and I think it's amazing, is I have clients who actually have quite athletic backgrounds, and I have people that have been totally sedentary. But I would say a commonality for everyone is realistically the traditional gym system isn't serving them, or they would be using it. Watching people go from I don't exercise or I am exercising in these environments and I'm not really feeling like I'm getting anything out of it, to simple things like walking down the street and saying, wow, I just really was feeling my bum in a different way. I was really feeling a connection to my shoulder totally differently when I lifted something into the cupboard. This joyful exploration of how movement becomes part of their life in a way that they didn't even know was possible. And actually, for me, it's interesting because I think my biggest sense of like, yeah, we did something is totally outside of exercise, because at the end of the day, most of us, A, aren't getting enough exercise, but B, that's what holds us back from wanting to move our body. And being sedentary kind of reinforces that spiral of mental and physical health challenges. The fact that somebody's going for a walk or lifting things and putting them into the cupboard, that's such a win. They're enjoying their body and they're enjoying the process of their body. And the other thing that always happens within that, I rarely get this in men, but I almost always get it in women, is people coming in and shredding some component of their body, my disgusting abs or my fat thighs. And these areas of their body, they never look terrible. They're human body parts. But people move away from that external aesthetic when they can connect to sensations in their own body and they can feel function there, and they end up feeling a totally different relationship to their body. It's not just this defective, quote unquote, gross body part that they wish that they could get rid of. They're able to really integrate, this is my body, it feels good. And they stop caring so much about what it looks like. And I'm just like, yay.
That sounds like a very empowering experience for yourself and your clients. A really big step, actually, I think, in their healing journey without maybe even realizing it.
Absolutely. We're not ever going to take care of something that we don't like. If you don't like something, including a body part, you're not going to care for it.
Yeah,
that is actually one of the things that trauma does to people. We tend to not like our bodies. So I'm very cautious about diagnosing trauma, but that could be a flag that you might have trauma.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. And let's talk a little bit about how our listeners could work with you. So what do you offer for programs, for services, and how can people connect with you if they want to know more, or they've been inspired by this episode and they'd like to work with you? How can they reach you?
My business name is My Body Couture, which is 3 words. My, M-Y. Second word is body, B-O-D-Y. Third word is couture, C-O-U-T-U-R-E. So I'm at the .com, and any social media site where I'm active, that is also the given name. I work with people mostly one-to-one. So you would reach out, send me an email, send me a DM on one of those platforms, and just request a conversation about a private session. You can also follow me. I post probably the most on Threads. If you're just interested in kind of learning a little bit more about the intellectual piece of it or looking at certain studies, I'm over there a couple times a day posting information. I don't post a lot of tips and tricks because that's not it, but there is a ton of different information and things to think about over there. So I'd be delighted to hear from any of you, and you're welcome to reach out or follow me on any platform, including my website.
Amazing. And we will be linking to all of Janis's offerings in the show notes as well. So be sure to check there for the links to her social platforms, her website, and all the other ways that you can get a hold of her at, including if you wanted to ask some questions, exchange yourself with her, or find out how you can do some one-on-one sessions with her. Well, this has been another incredible episode, and I really hope our listeners have enjoyed our journey into movement for mental health. And what a discussion this has been. Thank you so much for coming on today and joining us and sharing your wisdom with us. I truly appreciate it. Thank you for being here, Janis.
Thank you very much.
Has been my pleasure, and take care, Janis.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Journey podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Journey on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejourney.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.